Hello folks, and welcome to our second consolidation video. This one is on how to prevent SQL injection attacks with the Codeigniter framework. Now, you're looking at a page here that's offline. This is actually from an old backup of the Insider Club, and I've built the most simple form possible with Codeigniter. Let's have a little look. I'll show you what's happening. So here's the form. It has a username, a submit button, and it submits the form to the current URL, okay? Pretty easy, do you agree? Okay, so now I'm going to add some more code, and I'm just going to paste in for the sake of being quick here, right? So some more code, and again, it's all very simple. We are taking in the posted username, we're looking at submit, and if the user submits the form, then it's going to say select all from members where username equals username. Then it's going to figure out how many rows were returned, and it's going to tell us what the MySQL query was that was generated, and also how many rows were produced. Can you handle the vibe? So let's give this a try, and I can tell you that on the Insider Club my own username happens to be Davcon, right? So if we go in here, I try Davcon and I press submit, then we have select all from members where username equals Davcon, and the query produced one row, and that's just perfect. Okay, now by the way, this is one of these videos where you're as well just watching. There's no need to type. Okay, just relax and and have a tea and a scone. You really just want to be watching this video, okay? No typing required. So this produces one row, and there's the query, and that's fine. That's exactly what we would expect. Now if somebody comes along with a duff username, something like that, and they hit submit, then obviously the query produces 0 rows. And folks, I want you to imagine that this is maybe a login screen or a thing for leaving a comment, something like that, okay? Now let's imagine that one day some really dodgy character comes along, and they're not a member of the website or anything, but let's imagine they just say, they don't know a username, right? But let's imagine if they then do a single quote and they say our ID is greater than, and they do another single quote, 0. Now, if they submit that, then have a look at the query that gets generated. This is going to generate a query that's like select all from members where username equals blah blah blah, or ID is greater than 0. And as you can see, tons of rows are returned. As a matter of fact, all of the rows are returned by this query. This is an SQL injection attack. And folks, if you're looking at that and thinking, well, who cares, it's not that much of a big deal, let me enlighten you. Here is the vibe, folks. If this was a login page or something like that, you've just given them access to that private area, potentially access to the whole thing. And as a matter of fact, I could give you a link to a free download right now. Now, I'm not going to give you the link, but trust me on this. There is a free download that when you install this, all you have to do is enter the domain name of the site that lets this stuff happen. And as soon as you enter that domain name, you have full access to the database. You can see the tables and the rows. You can do edits, creates, deletes, As a matter of fact, it actually looks like PHPMyAdmin. So when you have a site that lets this kind of thing happen, this is absolute death for web developers. This is the worst possible nightmare that you could imagine, and it's called an SQL injection attack, okay? Now, a lot of Codeigniter developers, I think, assume that if they do this comma true, then that means they've done something to do with security and everything's going to be just fine, okay? So I've added true onto that, and I'm going to say testing true. Let's give it a test. And very quickly, we'll just see if that results in any kind of positive change. Okay, so here we go again. We are now testing true. We've added comma true onto the username. We're going to do our little injection attack. We're going to press submit. And as you can see, still all of the rows are returned. And this true, unfortunately, does nothing to protect us against injection attacks. So, I'm not saying you shouldn't use true, by the way, but as far as preventing SQL injection attacks go, this is rubbish, okay? That's the vibe, and now you know. So, if we go over to the Codeigniter user guide, you'll notice that the user guide gives you a few ideas, you know, different things that you can try, but it doesn't really say, hey, by the way, this is the one, right? It does not do that. And as a matter of fact, the PHP manual is the same. If you have a look around on how to prevent an SQL injection attack, my speculation is that you're going to have a hard time finding an article that actually says this is the thing to use, this will make you 100% safe, voila, right? You'll have a really hard time finding that. Now, I think that one of the main reasons why that's the case is because, you know, security is a moving target. And it's not so long ago, actually, that people were using, I'll just write under here, it's not so long ago that people were using ad slashes to prevent SQL injection attacks. In fact, up until very recently, the official recommendation was to use MySQL real escape string. And everybody thought, well, if we do that, we're going to be okay. Here's the news flash, folks. Actually, and you can look this up on Google, there are certain circumstances where MySQL real escape string and ad slashes are actually useless. They don't offer 100% protection. So we need other ways of dealing with custom database queries. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why in the PHP community, everyone's now using things like PDO and MySQLi, because we need other stuff, you know? This is just not good enough. So anyway, we now have a good idea that the true thing doesn't work. And take it from me, ad slashes, MySQL real escape string, it's not 100% either. Go look this up, check it out, and do your own research. So what I'm going to do, I think, for the rest of this video is I'm going to test drive a couple of the things on Codeigniter, maybe 2 or 3 of these things, and we'll see for ourselves how these things work out. And then at the end of the video, hopefully, we'll be able to make some kind of intelligent decision as to how we can prevent this from happening. Okay, so that's the vibe. Now, the first thing that I'd like to test from Codeigniter is this vibe here. It says it's a very good security practice to escape your data before submitting it, okay? And they've got this thing called DB escape. So I'm gonna, I think, give DB escape a little test drive, okay? So let's just, that's what we're going to be test driving. I'm going to copy this test 1 thing. You can just watch, you know, no need to type along today. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to test DB escape. That's the vibe. Now, DB escape is remarkably simple, folks. All we have to do is escape the stuff that we are passing into the query. So it basically looks like this, okay? And I'm going to DB escape the entire MySQL query. Can you handle the vibe? Let's do it, and let's see if DB escape works. So we're going to head over to test 2. We are ready to test DB escape. Now here comes the injection attack, right? Here it is. I'm going to press submit. And as you can see, we have a database error, which is not cool, okay? we can see the query that was generated here. This is what brought the error up. We can see that it's added some backslashes, but it has ran into some challenges. Now, I'll DB escape just the username and see how that does, okay? So let's just say username equals, and where is the DB escape code again? Something like that, and we'll jump in here. So we're going to just DB escape the username, not the full query, okay? Maybe that's what went wrong, who knows? Maybe that's what we need to do. So here we go again. We're now going to DB escape the username. I'm running the SQL injection attack, and as you can see, another database error. Now, in fairness, at least it never returned all of those results, okay? So that horrible software I was talking about that the hackers can use, that probably will not work if a site was using this DB escape. However, I would say that DB escape is probably better, but still not great, okay? I think that's being quite diplomatic about it, actually. So let's try something else. How about that, right? I'm going to test query binding, okay? So query binding is kind of a new thing on the PHP landscape. A lot of the new PHP frameworks use query binding, and lots of people consider this to be a much safer way of doing custom queries. So let's try this. Now the syntax looks a little bit strange the first time you look at this, but don't worry, we can do this. I'll keep you right, and it's going to be easy, okay? So the vibe with query binding, I'll paste in here. The vibe is, I'll lose the margin actually. You run the query as normal, but wherever you are submitting a variable, right, that's going to go onto this query, we just do a question mark. Now notice folks, there's no single quotes, double quotes, there's no backslashes, there's no variable names. We just do a question mark. That's how query binding works. And then when we run the thing, we pass in the query. That's the query with the question marks. And we also pass in an array. An array of what? An array of the variables that we'd like to submit. That's the vibe, okay? It's as easy as that. Now I'll make this look a little bit tidier so that we all feel at home, right? So it'll be something like MySQL query equals that, okay? And we would have something like in our case, select all from members where username equals question mark. Yes, thank you very much. That's the vibe. So we pass in the MySQL query and we pass in the array. Now in this case, our array just contains the username. That's all we need and everything's fine. So if we now just say that the query equals that stuff there, then folks, we can do all of our num rows stuff and we can see if this query binding business actually works, okay? So I'm going to try this. It's on test 3. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. Now remember folks that when it puts the query on the screen, the screen, it's going to give us these crazy question marks and stuff. But we'll deal with that in just a second. Here comes the SQL injection attack using query binding, right? So here is the malicious code. I'm going to press submit. And as you can see, that is perfect. The query has produced 0 rows, and that is a good result, okay? So thank you, query binding. It looks pretty good, okay? Now, I was saying a minute ago that the query here is a bit strange, and obviously that's not actually the query that was run. To see the query that was run, we can make a variable up called last query, and it would equal this db last query, and we do that, okay? That's how we get the last query. So we can have a look at this, and once again I'll try the little injection attack, and there is the query, okay? So you can see that it's added in backslashes. It knows exactly where to add them. It knows how to contain the variables that we are submitting. It's staying right on top of things. Look at this. User is davcon. Okay. Produces one row. Let's do a meaningless user. Everything is awesome. So the moral of the story is that query binding is actually very good. Okay. This appears to be a very good vibe, and actually it is. This is awesome stuff, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of the newer frameworks are using query binding. Okay, and now you know how to use query binding. However, we are not entirely finished, folks, because there's other things you can do that are perhaps even better still. Okay, and I'll just do test 4. We'll set one up here. And in fact, one of the things that's very, very super cool is to use Codeigniter's inbuilt query builder. Okay, so let me just show you this and we'll test that. Okay, so testing the query builder. This is Codeigniter's query builder. Okay, Codeigniter's query builder. Okay, I suppose I should do a backslash. Right, okay. Testing, backslash comma. Oh man, I'm all mixed up. Testing Codeigniter's query builder, right? This would be test 4. Let's bring it up. And folks, the nice thing is we've been using this all throughout this tutorial series. You know how to do this. This stuff comes with all of those, what I'm calling perfect models and all of that. It's very easy, and all we have to say is just one line of code. It would be query is this, get where custom, username is username. Okay, one line of code. That's the query builder. Okay, so shall we give this a try? Well, we don't have a MySQL query here, so I suppose I should do this last query business again. Last query equals this db last query, and there we go, last query. Okay, so that should be us. We are now testing Codeigniter's query builder. So let's try the injection attack. Here we go. We'll press submit. And as you can see, no rows were produced. We have no error messages, and the add slashes, the kind of encapsulation of the variables and all that is just perfect. This is also a very, very good way to prevent SQL injection attacks. So I'm going to say that this is even better, maybe even the best, because the code is just so short and nice. This is awesome. Okay, so I think that we're starting to formulate a picture here about how we should be dealing with queries, you know, and how we should be keeping ourselves safe from SQL injection attacks. But folks, I'm not even finished, because the nice thing is, you know, that sometimes in life the best solutions are simple solutions. Now, if you're watching this thinking, oh man, we're going to have to go back and change every single query in this tutorial, man, this is a drag and the whole thing's wide open. Well, listen, relax, because actually, once you've been doing this stuff for a while, eventually it becomes a habit. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm not showing off here, but even without thinking about it, all the way through this tutorial series, you have been making the application safe all the way through. And sometimes the way that you've been making the application safe is really, really simple, but very effective. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. If we go to the shop here, right, CI shop, and we go to something like this Fender's guitar page, and we go here, right, look at the URL. We've got this 20 here, right? Now remember, you could potentially, or at least a hacker could potentially submit malicious stuff via forms, but also via the URL, right? We need to watch both forms coming in and the URL. But check it out, folks. If we go back to store categories, I think that was where this one was, right? And hang on, I'm on the wrong site. Give me a second here. Open recent, it was that one there. And we're going to open up store categories, right? And we've got a vibe of get offset. Do you remember that stuff? And look at this. Without even thinking, we added in, if not is numeric, then offset is 0, okay? And the really nice thing is, that's very simple. Everyone can understand that. There's nothing complicated going on. But that little if statement, and that's all it is basically making this page like Fort Knox, you know? People can add anything they want here. Anything at all. Anything. And it's not going to break. Just a little if statement. And in fact, you'll find if you go through this entire series, we've been doing this all over the place, okay? Look, if not is numeric, update ID, see, there's another, if not is numeric. So sometimes the best security, folks, is just little simple checks, little tests, testing the data that's coming in. And here is the vibe. If you have a page or a form that's expecting a number, you don't have to worry necessarily about query binding or query builder and all of that stuff. You don't need to worry. You can just do a little check. Is this numeric? And that's you. If you're expecting an email address, you can run some of the Codeigniter validation and check that the format is a valid email format. And as a matter of fact, if you're building something like, for example, a discussion forum, right, then you might want to run some inbuilt PHP stuff. It's very simple. Let's say, for example, it's a forum. You might want to do something like comment equals strip tags comment. Why would anybody want to submit a comment with all sorts of malicious, dodgy stuff? We can easily eliminate that with some simple code. Look, one line of code, see? So the vibe is that actually you can prevent SQL injection attacks with some extremely simple measures. So here is DC's SQL injection protection recommendations. The first one is use inbuilt PHP features and Codeigniter form validation to make sure incoming data is safe. We've already gone over some of this stuff. You've been doing it. I'm talking about things like is numeric, okay? The numeric, okay? The if statements. I'm talking about things like strip tags, trim, anything at all that PHP has. There's actually some new filters that have came with PHP as well. Use that stuff along with Codeigniter stuff so we can check, obviously with form validation, if it's a valid email and so on. Use that stuff. It is our first line of defense, and we've actually been doing that in this tutorial series. There is no need to go back and rewrite stuff, okay? Just relax. The next recommendation is, wherever possible, use Codeigniter's query builder, okay? It's just a line of code usually for us, at least, maybe a couple of lines tops. It's something that has been gone over by people who know about this kind of stuff, and as we've just demonstrated, it's pretty solid, okay? So use the query builder wherever possible. Again, that's something that we've been doing, so just relax. This is something that you know, okay? Okay, the third one here that I'm going to give you is if you're doing a custom query that accepts data from the user, then use query binding, okay? Query binding is very solid. We've just demonstrated it. It's quite easy, and there's no reason why not, okay? That is the third recommendation. Okay, my fourth recommendation is remember that dangerous data can come from the URL as well as from forms, okay? So if you're taking in anything at all from the URL, an offset, sort by, a product name, anything at all, remember that could also be dangerous. We need to check the URL stuff, make sure that's safe, as well as the forms. Can you handle the vibe? Alright, now my last recommendation is be extra careful if you're using Ajax, AngularJS, I could have added React.js, Ember.js, any of that fancy JavaScript stuff. You need to be extra careful. As a matter of fact, if I was a hacker, then I would be going after the AngularJS people. That's the site. I would be looking for sites with Angular, and that's who I'd be trying to hack, okay? And the reason why is because over the last year, I've done 3 paid AngularJS courses. I actually like AngularJS, right? I've done 3 courses, and not one of them mentions security. And right now, there's companies all over the world hiring Angular developers, React developers, and all that. They're building all of this fancy JavaScript stuff, and they are not covering the basics. I actually predict, that in the next 2 years, you're going to see large corporations getting whacked because they did not secure those APIs, An API is just a page that accepts posted variables and then interacts with the database, okay? Thousands and thousands of developers are building this really, really fancy stuff, but leaving the site wide open. Actually, we built some fancy stuff in the tutorial. Do you remember this? Remember this? Shuffling the stuff about, okay? What does that actually do? Well, it sends data to store categories /sort, okay? You remember that stuff. And if you look at store categories sort, you'll see that we added in a make sure is admin. And that's the vibe, this should become a habit. I'm not showing off, but this is kind of a habit for me. I don't really need to think about it. Whenever a variable comes in somewhere, I'm always thinking, right, should this be numeric? Right, make it numeric. If not is numeric, they're not getting through. This sort thing, who should be doing this? Well, only an administrator. So, right, fine, make sure is admin, okay? And there's always got to be something. That's the vibe, okay? So anyway, enough of my lecturing. Thanks for sitting through this video. I know that it's been a long video, but if it helps someone out there to stay safe, then it's been worthwhile. Stay cool, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.